Hello, Greenlighters. It is Jessica Sittimer, your Greenlight coach, and I am here with an amazing mentor. I'm so excited because I got to spend some time, quality time with him in Los Angeles, really getting a feel for what he does, and he is a passionate guy. Originally from Lafayette, Louisiana, Michael Lyle is a Foley artist at Universal Studios, where he creates live sound effects for TV shows and films. Favorite Foley roles have been Dr. Gregory House's Limp and Cane. That's one of my favorite as well. I love that show. The Squeaky Minions in Despicable Me, and himself in Diet Coke's Not All Stars Appear on Screen commercial, a part of the 2012 Oscar telecast. In 2004, he won both the Emmy and MPSE Golden Reel Awards for HBO's and starring Pancho Villa as himself. Having walked off with the only two awards Foley artists can win, he had lots of fun telling friends that he swept award season. There's also an Emmy for 61, a House MD Golden Reel, and numerous nominations. Musically speaking, Michael plays a jazz and blues drummer band leader with the Blue Cat Express, which was nicknamed House Band at the Mansion by Playboy Jazz Festival President Dick Rosenzweig. His wife, vocalist and music educator Heather Lyle, who you'll hear a little bit about later as well, she sings. So check out their CD, Spirit of New Orleans. Favorite performances, Jacksonville Jazz Festival, LSU Alumni Association Crawfish Boils, and 4th of July, Grotto Side at the Playboy Mansion. Craziest work experience? Waking up after performing at Jacksonville Jazz Fest and making it back to Universal for a 3:30 p.m. house call. He still wonders why he scheduled those two gigs back to back. Michael and Heather live in Pacific Palisades with jazz cats Tiger and Annie. Well, that is quite an introduction for quite a man. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Jessica. Good to talk to you.
You too. So tell everyone, what is your story, your background, and when you knew you wanted to pursue a career in entertainment?
Well, I knew I wanted to have a career in entertainment when I was 9, and I remember the moment. It was I started listening to music seriously back then, and two songs, These Eyes by the Guess Who and You've Made Me So Very Happy by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, just always conjured up these smoky images of lights and dark performance spaces, and performing just sounded like the coolest profession to me. And from then, I was thinking about it, probably all the way up until high school. I actually put that off for a while to attend college and left it behind, and we'll kind of pick that up a little later on in the conversation.
Okay. So when you did decide to fully commit, how did your journey begin?
Well, the journey began, as I said, I played music all through elementary and high school. Back then, I grew up in Louisiana, so the concept of being in film or TV didn't really appeal to me because no one had movie cameras back then. You didn't have the access to video that you have. No one had computers, anything like that. And Louisiana is about as far removed from Hollywood as you can get. So I spent a few years, 3 years at LSU, Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, and then just was ready for a change, and I transferred to University of Texas at Austin. And I had quit playing music to go to college, and once I arrived in Austin, there was just this thriving music scene there that I started to fall into. And there was a film school at University of Texas, pretty good when they have a great film school right now, and back then they were one of the better film schools in the country. So I started getting exposed to film students, and I had a few friends who were making movies and who were in the program. And Austin was starting to get a little bit of attention as a place to film movies. So I continued my studies at University of Texas, and I was pre-med, was going to go into medicine, and I just started to get a little fed up and burn out with it, and just started thinking about whether I really wanted to make the commitment to graduate school. And one night I was studying for an organic chemistry test, and I just kind of hit my I just hit my level where I couldn't handle it anymore. And I closed the books. I went out. I went down to 6th Street, which is where all the clubs are in Austin. And I heard this great jazz band playing in a club. And I walked into the club and sat there and listened and went up to the drummer on a break and started talking. And I said, hey, I want to study with you. And he said, well, are you playing? I said, no, I haven't played in 3 years. So he said, well, come back to me in a year. Go get yourself a little playing experience. So I managed to get into a jazz combo program at University of Texas. And the next year I came back to this drummer, and we started studying, and I quit school because I just couldn't see myself finishing a biology degree, and I needed to take a break. About a year later, I got the opportunity to take off and travel with a youth group called Up With People that put on a professionally produced show. It's kind of a cultural exchange program, and I was in a cast of about 100 people. We did a musical, and I spent a year traveling through North America and Europe, and I got exposed to playing on nice-sized stages, anywhere between like 700, 800, and 10,000 people. Great experience, got a lot of great stage experience. From that point, I finished Up With People after a year and formed a band with some friends I played music with in that group, and we managed to get a gig in Italy. So decided I was just going to take off and go to Europe and stay there for the rest of my life because I'd already been over and I just loved it. So was living in Austin at the time after Up With People, and packed everything into my car, drove up to Detroit and met up with the keyboard player from my group, and we brought the guitar player from the band down from Canada. He was living in Montreal. We rehearsed for about 3 months, and then I took off to Italy with a one-way plane ticket and $60.
Oh my gosh.
So
talk about having some faith.
Yeah, I really had faith, but I didn't have a lot of options at the time either. So, I knew some people over there. It didn't. You definitely have to go into the entertainment business. You definitely have to have faith in yourself. So, we got a gig as the house band at a resort that was sort of like a Club Med, and I spent about 6 months there doing nothing but windsurfing and playing drums, which is a great thing to be doing when you're in your 20s. However, I ended up having to work with a really burnt-out Italian singer who was around 40 years old, and he was a pretty miserable person. And I just kind of realized that if I didn't make some changes in what I was doing and start to really take my profession seriously as far as education and training, it wasn't going to be too long where I was going to, before I knew it, I would be in this guise shoes, and I just saw a pretty scary picture. So I ended up, our contract ran out, and I managed to get myself back to Detroit where my car was, and worked for a couple of months, scraped enough money together to move out to Los Angeles, because there was this really great music school at the time called Grove School of Music, which had some of the top players in the industry as teachers. And so I came out to LA, arrived here with $90 and this Toyota Celica that had 250,000 miles on it, and I had a place to stay for about 6 weeks. And as soon as I got into town, the car broke down, and it cost like 95 or 100 to fix. So I got here, I was flat broke. I ended up having to pawn some of my drum equipment to actually feed myself for the first couple of weeks. And I found a job and worked 3 jobs to save up the money to go to music school. And then I went to music school, spent a very intense year studying, and then got out and started working. I would say that I managed to eke out a living playing music, but at that time the industry was really changing, and anyone who, I mean, we don't have record stores anymore. Everything's done online. The music industry has just shifted dramatically. And I just saw that the opportunities were being limited, and I wasn't really playing music that I liked. I was doing a lot of musical theater and just having to take any gig under the sun. So I started looking at the film industry, because when I'd go to movies, I'd see all of these titles in the credits. I'd see music editor, music supervisor, sound effects editor, Foley artist, and I started an exploration of all of this industry and what was actually out there. And UCLA Extension had a class called music editing, and that just sounded like a pretty cool job to me. So I enrolled and took that class over the summer and started learning a little bit about post-production. And I just thought, yeah, this is the direction that I want to go in with this, because I'm not playing music that I like, and if I'm playing music, I want to be doing something that I really love and really get the joy of performing out of. So I just, at the end of this class, the instructor did about 30 minutes on how to find work, and his advice was, well, just getting your foot in the door somewhere. You're going to have to go work somewhere. You'll answer phones. You'll sweep the floor. You'll go out go pick up lunch. You'll clean toilets, just whatever you have to do. And so I was doing...
I've never given that advice. I've never given that advice. I give very different job advice.
Yeah, exactly. So I took him literally, and I was doing a lot of temp work at that time to support myself, in addition to the music gigs. And so I started telling the temp agencies that I was interested in music editing or music supervision. And one called me one day and said, hey, you can do music supervision, right? And I said, yeah, of course. And so they ended up sending me to Warner Chappell to do this job administering contracts for music supervision on movies. And I got into this position, and it turned out it was a lot of legal jargon, and I was completely in over my head, and I lasted there for about 2 days, and they figured out I didn't know a thing about music supervision. So I was released from my position, but I kept at it. I realized, well, maybe not music supervision. I really should go and try and move towards the more creative end. And later on, I don't know, about 6 or 7 months later, I got a call from a temp agency saying to me, would you like to go to Universal Studios? They need a data entry person in the post-sound department. And post-sound was exactly where I needed to be. So I said, absolutely. So I went down to Universal the next day, and it turned out they needed about, I don't know, 3 months worth of data entry work done. And the first thing someone said when I walked in the door was, I wonder how long he's going to last. And it turned out they were getting people on this job who were lasting maybe 2 or 3 days and then just quitting, because it was one of the most boring things in the world to do. But I just decided right there that I need to be here. And so I said, yeah, this is not going to be a whole lot of fun, but I'm going to stick it out. And as it turned out, the second day I found out that the woman sitting next to me, the secretary, was from my hometown. And we ended up knowing a lot of the same people and got along great. And 7 years later, she turned out to be running the department at Universal, and she was the person who called me and offered me the position that I've been in for the past 9 years. So anyway, I'm just jumping ahead for a second. But anyway, so I stayed there, did that job, and I started to meet people, sound effects editors, mixers, dialogue editors, and started hanging out with people on my lunch break. Guys on the mix stage started to know me when they'd finish a mix on a reel. They'd call upstairs and say, hey, send Michael down so he can listen back to us. And but at the same time, I took the work I was doing very seriously and focused on getting through it, and just got to know people. When it came time for the job to end, they said to me, look, you're welcome back here anytime you just want to come hang out. And so when I didn't have anything to do, when I wasn't working somewhere, there was a sound effects editor who I'd go and sit and watch him work in his booth. And I guess after the third or fourth time I went in, he finally looked at me and said, hey, you want to learn how to do this? And I said, yeah. Well, he had a home studio where he was doing independent films, and he offered to train me. He said he couldn't pay me anything while I was learning, but he would try to compensate me once I'd learned. And the things he was working on really didn't have much of a budget, but I took up residence in his studio, and he started teaching me about how to work the equipment, how to cut sound effects. And I would say probably I did a couple of projects for him, and then he got a little film that he had a budget for. I think he may have paid me like $300 to cut effects on an entire low-budget movie, and I spent a lot of time on it. He came in, I'd do some work, he'd come sit down, look at it, tear it apart, say, oh, okay, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to do this over again. And I just banged away at it, and a lot of times I'd be working a temp job during the day, and I would go to his studio after I finished work and work till 12, 1 in the morning, go back home, go to sleep, wake up, go to work. I mean, it was pretty intense. So I would say he kept getting jobs in, and then about 9 months later, he got a film that needed Foley done on it. And he knew that I was a drummer, and Foley is a very rhythmic art. And he just said to me, I'm going to train you to be a Foley artist. You're going to do the Foley on this film. And so he had another guy working with him who wanted to learn to be an engineer. And he got a friend of his to let us use his garage music studio out in the valley and put me and the aspiring engineer in this studio. And while he said he was going to train us, he just kind of took off, and we never really saw him. But we ended up spending about a week doing 12-hour days, and we'd do part of the show, and the guy's name's Lydian Tone. Lydian would come in, and he'd look at it and once again tear it apart and show us everything we were going to have to do over. But we got through it. The client was happy. It actually ended up being on Showtime, so the first thing I ever worked on I actually got to watch on TV with my name in the credits, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then he started getting more jobs. And from there, it was just a matter of work would come in, we'd do the work, I'd be out of work for a while, and over the next couple of years, things started to pick up more. And I would say after about maybe 3 or 4 years, I was able to devote myself to this full time, and it turned out that I was really kind of a natural at Foley. It just went with my percussion skills. And I gravitated from doing both sound effects editing and Foley to just being a Foley artist. And it took off. I ended up working in a lot of independent studios, and then went to Sony and worked for a short period, was working a little bit at 20th Century Fox, and then doing a lot of work at indie studios, and was doing okay. And it turned out that Universal was getting really busy and needed to add a second team, and that was when the call came from Universal. And pretty much what I do these days is lots of TV shows for Universal. We've had very busy seasons the past couple of years, and continue to play with the jazz band, and that's kind of my story and my journey.
Wow. So during those years of sort of going in, like when you were building your career as a Foley artist, were you generating the work for yourself, or were you just sort of waiting for it to come along? Like how were you, I mean, because Foley is very specialized and there aren't too many people who really make it. So
No, very few, very few. Well, I had to be very, very proactive. I would make calls. I would cold call people, and that's kind of a numbers game. Every once in a while, something would come in from cold calling, but Foley is specialized, and everyone knows who the working Foley artists are. So I was I was definitely an unknown person. No one knew who I was. I didn't know any other Foley artists. So I would just take any opportunity I could to do Foley. One of the first movies I worked on where I got to work on a major stage, there was actually John Rush, one of the really great Foley artists, did a Foley seminar at the Learning Annex, and he told us at the end of it that if we wanted to get into Foley, we just volunteer to do student films, just get work, that we weren't going to be able to worry about the money and getting paid in the beginning. We may get a token sum, but we certainly weren't going to be paid what the rate that I'm paid now, or that's the standard customary rate. I actually walked out of that seminar and went across the street. It was on the promenade in Santa Monica, and there was a kind of a film music conference going on at a record store, and people were asking questions of these music supervisors, and a couple of guys raised their hands and said, "Hey, we have this independent film," and they were asking something about the music. I don't know what it was, but after the seminar, I walked up to them and I said, "Hey, you guys have a film you're working on?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm a Foley artist. Do you need someone to do the Foley?" And they said, "Oh, yeah, but we've got a studio donated, but we don't have a budget for it." So I said, "Oh, I'll do it." And I volunteered to do a few things. However, I think the key with my success is that every time I've shown up, I treat the project like it is the most important project in the world, and it doesn't matter whether I'm helping someone out on a student film or I'm working up at Skywalker Sound or Universal. People are going to get my best whenever I show up, and that circulates. People learn that about you. They know when people show up and go the extra mile. But a couple other things I did, I'd try all kinds of things. I found out I could run a free ad in the Hollywood Reporter Blue Book. I had an ad running in there. I actually got a few calls from that, I remember, and I would go to film festivals like LA Independent Film Festival and leave some business cards on the table, and I got a few calls from that, and I would just try different things. Whenever I saw an opportunity to meet someone or talk to someone, I'd let them know who I was, and it's a lot easier to get work now than it was back then, but I did manage to build a career with that strategy.
Why do you say it's easier to get work now than it was back then?
Oh, just because of
You
my
mean for you
reputation.
personally?
For me
Oh,
personally, yeah.
I thought you meant in general. Okay.
No, no.
Well, it really sounds like you seized opportunities. You saw those two guys who were asking questions, and then you walked up to them after the seminar and you said, "Hey, are you looking for somebody to help you with your film? I do Foley." And then you volunteered. Now, let me ask you something. At that time, were you married?
Uh, I don't know if I may not have been married, but my wife and I have been together for 23 years, and I know I'm trying to remember if we were together. We owned our home. We had bought a home, so while I didn't have the piece of paper, I was absolutely very vested in a relationship.
Right. So she was there throughout all this, through
Oh, yeah.
freebies, through the temping, through all of your sacrifices that you were making.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
And what was the key to your success, would you say? Because, I mean, that's something that a lot of people in the entertainment, I know she's in entertainment too, so maybe she has a better understanding. But a lot of people find it very challenging to keep relationships going, especially when somebody starts out and they are struggling and then they have success, and then that's a whole nother level. So she's been through the whole thing with you. What's
Right.
been the key to that success?
Well, we have a lot of common interest. That's very important right there. We actually met when I was in music school. She was taking some classes there, and we have our band together, and she sings. So we actually do a lot of work together. But for anyone who's going into entertainment, you need to choose your partner carefully, because it's got to be someone who understands that you may have long stretches where you're not around that much, that you may be working long hours, that you may not be making that much money in the beginning. And with that being said, someone who's gone into entertainment has to understand that while their friends that they went to high school with may be finishing med school or law school or starting to do pretty well, they are more than likely still going to be kind of eking along unless they've been really lucky, because it really takes a while to establish a career in this business. But a couple of things about being proactive and seizing opportunity. I have learned that in life, whatever you're doing, you have to ask for the sale. I mentioned, excuse me, I'm getting some water because I'm getting a little dry.
You're making my job very easy here. I've barely talked at all.
Oh, well, thank you.
This is the greatest interview ever.
Oh, fantastic. Well, my mom was the national debate champ, so that's another story. Not someone who it was easy to win an argument with. But I mentioned the Diet Coke commercial in my bio. There was this commercial that was part of the Oscar telecast the past couple of years. Now, I do not claim to be an actor, and I didn't set out to be one, but it just so happened one night I showed up for work at Universal, and this group of people walk onto my Foley stage, and I was giving a tour to a few people who were friends of someone in the department, and so I'm giving my little tour, and they walk in, and I said, "Oh, what group are you with?" And they said, "We're scouting locations." And I thought they had walked onto the Foley stage by accident, and I said, "Well, what are you scouting for?" And they said, "A Diet Coke commercial." And I said, "Oh, I'm available." And it was just kind of a joke. And they said to me, well, gosh, we're doing this commercial about movies and what goes on behind the scenes, and we want to use some actual crew members. And I said, oh, well, in that case, Foley's the best part of filmmaking. You got to have Foley in it. And the producer, who was the director, actually said, oh, I love Foley. I'd love to have Foley in it. And I said, well, what days are you shooting? And they said, December 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And I said, well, what day do you want me there? And about 3 days later, they sent a casting agent out to see me and talk to me. And 3 weeks later, I found myself on the lot at Paramount shooting a Diet Coke commercial. So I saw and I made a joke. I realized there was an opportunity, and I said, I'm going with this. And as anyone knows who knows anything about commercials, that was definitely the best payday I've ever had. And then another thing that I really try to do with my work, the band Blue Cat Express, where actually it says something about Playboy Mansion in the bio, I think for about a 6-year run, we had this standing gig at the Playboy Mansion on 4th of July because they were looking for a New Orleans-style jazz band to take the place of Preservation Hall Jazz Band, who had played there a few years previously. And so I managed to get that gig, and as opposed to just showing up and playing, I decided to make it really special. And they had asked us to march in like a brass band from New Orleans, and so I went out and got some hats and stuff in the Mardi Gras colors, bought a ton of red, white, and blue Mardi Gras beads, and had a couple of extra people come with me. And we did a parade into the mansion, going around, throwing beads. We just started out and made it really festive. And then we did the gig, and I had just decided I want to come do this every year. I was thinking of something else that was really special that I could do to say thank you to them. And there's a Mardi Gras cake that everyone eats in New Orleans and Louisiana at carnival time called a king cake, and it's a circular cake. Well, okay, you're familiar with king cakes. Well, I found someone in L.A. who knew how to bake a king cake, and I had him bake a cake in the Playboy logo and decorate it with beads and doubloons and trinkets, and had that delivered to Hef as a thank you. So and every year after that, we would always try and make things better. That first year, there used to be a show called Playboy After Dark on TV when I was growing up, and there was a theme song called Playboy After Dark. We dug that up, and I had we did an arrangement of that song and played that for them, so their ears really perked up when they heard this. Then we took the sheet music, and all the band members signed it, thanking Hef for having us there. He had, I think, 7 girlfriends at the time.
That's all?
Yeah, I brought little gifts. So I made sure that we made a statement there. We weren't just the band that had shown up. And I think in any kind of situation that you're in, you've got to stand out, especially in entertainment. So if you're a creative person who's an actor or a set designer or a writer, you've got to use that creative part of your brain and tap into figuring out how can you make this job special and put your own personal signature on it.
I love that. And on the flip side, being that you work with so many people over the years, do you find that that's a rarity? Do you find that people kind of just take it for granted and they're working, and that's why they don't have the longevity that you've had?
Yeah, I do find that I don't find in general. I know so many artists and artistic people who don't want to think about marketing, who just want to sit around and kind of dream and be creative all day, and which is nice work if you can get it, but you've got to think about business. You take some of our greatest filmmakers, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Both of those guys are as creative as it gets, but they're incredible business, and they really have their mind on business as well as art.
Have you learned anything from them specifically?
No, because I haven't had that. I have not had that kind of not on a personal level, but yeah, absolutely watching the way they run their business, and when you can't help but if you work for. I've worked for Skywalker Sound quite a few times, and just looking at that operation up there that George Lucas has created between Skywalker Ranch, Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic. One person created that business and then also created Star Wars.
Right.
I mean, obviously he's a genius, but everyone who wants to thrive in entertainment over the long run needs to think a little bit about business and how they're going to market themselves. There's a lucky few who get by without doing that. But I've never wanted to be at the mercy of sitting around waiting for the phone to ring, because when I first arrived in town and started getting into this business, the phone did not ring, and I don't think it rings for anyone who's not a little proactive.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really good point, and that is that, because I teach people in the program how to physically like get mentors who they can speak to and have conversations with. But, you can also learn from people who you haven't actually met just by deconstructing and maybe reading an autobiography about them and looking at their accomplishments. And you can see just by being in their environment, if you work on a studio or something, you can see how people, like you were saying with George Lucas, you can see that obviously this man had a focus on both business and the creative side. So, you can look for people in your industry who you might not have access to and sort of deconstruct how they've gotten to where they've gotten, how they reinvent themselves, how they market themselves, even if it's a publicist who's marketing them. How has the publicist been marketing them through the years to keep reinventing them and giving them the longevity? So there's, two ways to learn from mentors, directly and indirectly.
Yeah, absolutely. And every craft in the industry has their own trade publications where you can read about the people who are doing the job that you want to do. My guild, the Local 700, has a lot of resources on their website. If you're an actor, there are so many acting magazines. I'm a drummer. There's a ton of drum magazines. When I was growing up, there weren't any resources like that. There were the way we'd learn songs were by listening to the record and slowing it down to 33 and trying to pick out the beats. Now, any song you want, there's someone who's thrown up a video on YouTube showing you how to play it, and just the resources for learning out there. And while we're on this subject, I will give you a couple of resources that I really like. There's a great book for actors and artists called Dreams into Action by the great acting teacher Milton Casellas, who founded Beverly Hills Playhouse. My wife studied there for a long time, and they have a fantastic program, and this is a fantastic book. Then anyone who's going into the film business needs to read Hello, He Lied by Linda Otts, because that is such. Of course you've read it. Yeah, she really breaks down the industry and specifically how Hollywood works. And she just released a new book that I haven't read yet, which is kind of an update to Hello, He Lied. And I can't wait to read it. And then something I learned a lot about filmmaking from and how to conduct yourself on a set was the TV series Project Greenlight, which ran for about 4 or 5 years. I believe it was produced by Matt Damon, and what they would do is have a contest where people would submit films, and the winner would get, I think it was $1 million to make a movie, and it was a documentary of this process, and just watching the mistakes that people make on this show and just not doing those mistakes, learning what not to do by watching Project Greenlight could probably assure you at least a certain amount of success.
Wow, that is a great resource that I had never thought of, and you're absolutely right.
Oh, yeah, Project Greenlight's great.
That was on HBO. I wonder how people could get that. Probably Netflix.
Yeah, you could find it on Netflix. The biggest mistake that I see young filmmakers making is not listening to their more experienced seasoned crew members.
Right.
So that's that's the biggest mistake that I see filmmakers making.
Okay, so I have to bring it up because so many people dream of winning awards, and you've won two Primetime Emmys, two Golden Reel Awards, and you've been nominated 15 times. So all these people who are out there dreaming about winning awards, I mean, what does it really feel like, and how did the awards how do they impact your career and your life? Like, did you dream about winning awards at one time, and then it actually happened, and then what? How? Tell us.
Okay. Uh, well, I think anyone growing up who wants to be in entertainment, you'll watch the Academy Awards, the Emmys, the Grammys, and you have, you think, God, that would be so incredible. And I actually watched. I remember one day watching maybe the Rock Awards or something in high school, and I remember writing in a journal that one day I'd be on that stage. So it was definitely something I'd thought of, and but it was more of kind of really dreaming, uh, and so the first time I really knew anything about the awards was that uh, Lydia and Tone, the guy who trained me, had gotten nominated for an Emmy, and I just saw the letter sitting on his mixing board for the nomination, and I was so impressed. So that was actually kind of a goal. I said, I want to be nominated for an Emmy. Well, it was that was such a special moment for me because uh, when I won, it was my first time being nominated, the first time I'd ever gone to a Hollywood Awards show, and I wasn't. I was kind of trying not to think about it, but then when we were driving to the show, I started getting a little nervous and realized, hey, I really want to win this award. And I was actually there were five projects nominated, and I actually had two nominations, and I knew my two shows were sounded the best, so I figured I had a pretty good shot at it. But anyway, so we got in there, and I win, and you go up on stage, and you go through the acceptance speech, you go backstage, get your award, and everyone's really celebrating back there. And I came back around and was walking down the aisle to meet my wife, and William Shatner was on stage accepting an Emmy, and he had been, I think, nominated maybe 16 times and had never won. And he walks up and gets his Emmy, and he just looks into the audience and says, "What took you so long?" And it really hit me then what a special moment that was, especially because it was my first time going. And it was actually, my wife had kept saying to me that she wanted an Emmy Award or a Grammy or something to put on the piano, and she was kind of on, it was starting to bug me a little bit, but I was ready for her because when I went and I sat down next to her, I just took the award and put it on her, in her lap and said, "Okay, here you go." But anyway, career-wise, it definitely helped me. I had done the project. The project hadn't been done for Universal, but I had been hired by Universal 2 weeks previously. So I show up there and I go to the Emmys and win. And so my boss was really happy because it made her look like a genius for hiring me. And Universal was great. They gave me a really nice gift basket and a gift certificate to Patina. And then my boss calls me at home and says, "Hey, there's something about your Emmy Award in Variety." And so I walked across the street to the market and bought a copy of Variety and opened it up, and Universal had taken out a full-page ad congratulating me. So that was, I just was blown away. It's one of those fantasy moments that you think about. And with my family, it was pretty funny because it was always, when you're an artist, I'm sure everyone listening can relate to it. Unless you come from an industry family, usually you're the person in the family, the creative one, and people ask you, what do you exactly do? And, they're worried about you. Well, once you have an Emmy under your belt, people quit asking you those questions. So, and then my sister's a pretty good publicist, and she made me do a press release for her, and she got an article about the award in all of the major papers in Louisiana. The Morning Advocate in Baton Rouge actually had me on the cover they gave me the cover of their Sunday magazine, and the reporters who called me to interview me all said, "Gah, we've seen a lot of people leave here for Los Angeles, but most of them end up coming back." So it was actually, it turned out it was a rarity for them to see someone who'd actually moved out here and was being pretty successful. But with that being said, awards help, but they aren't something that you can prop yourself up on, because every day you go to work, the battle begins all over, and people are judging you by your last performance. So just because I have an Emmy Award doesn't mean I can show up and do less of a job. And I've known people who've gotten a little too caught up in that and who've tried to prop themselves, and it just doesn't hold water.
I just have to ask, you have such, and I knew this, the day I spent with you at Universal, you have such an amazing work ethic. You have such an amazing attitude. Is it something you've always had, or is it something that you learned that you needed? Or, I mean, just listening to you, like you're just like you're any producer's dream, and you're just such a wonderful role model. Is it just something you were born with, or were you taught it, or did you have to figure it out for yourself?
Well, I grew up in a place and in a time where you had to work really hard. Growing up in Louisiana, when we get out of school and work in the summertime, we were doing really hard work outside, or I'd work in really busy restaurants. I spent a summer repairing mobile homes for a while in college. I spent the summer offshore laying pipeline on a barge, where I was living on the barge and working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, doing really hard, dirty work. So those days, I remember stuff like that. And, being at this time, it's a little easier because being on the lot at Universal, that's a pretty cush job compared to some of the stuff that I came from. But I think that I get to do something that I really like and that I'm good at, so that really helps. And you can have really long nights sometimes. There have been times where I've gone to work at 3:30 in the afternoon and have driven home at sunup. That doesn't happen that often, but that's when I really have to dig down. But I think one instance that really sticks with me, when my career first took off, I got really booked up around Christmas time, and it was really tough. I was working double shifts, and there was one night, I think after about the fourth or fifth night of this, I was in a really bad mood, and I was driving home, and I had to stop and fill up my car with gas, and I walked into the gas station, and the guy behind the counter was really nice to me, and I just thought to myself, man, I just made more in one day than this guy is going to make this week, and I'm never going to complain about this. So there are times where you get kind of tired. I may get a little tired, or I may get a little cranky. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, I just kind of stop and check myself. And at the end of the day, the people who I work for don't want to know about my problems. They want me to get the job done. And there have been a few scary moments where I've felt a little defeated, and I just catch my breath and say, okay, if you keep pushing when you're really feeling like you're getting burnt out on a gig, if you really keep pushing, you'll eventually break through and get a second win. But yeah, I definitely try and just keep a positive attitude. But it's as I said, I'm really lucky to be doing what I'm doing. So,
Well, just a quick callback to what you said earlier, and that is that the woman who hired you for your job at Universal was the woman who was at the desk next to you, and you happened to grow up in the same area. Now, did you stay in touch with her all those years?
oh yeah, the whole time I had stayed in touch with her. I would, when she got a promotion, I think I sent her a card or flowers. I'd keep in touch, see how she was doing. Every once in a while, I'd go over and meet her for lunch. So, yeah, we definitely stayed in touch. And I also let her know what I was doing and what I was up to. So, yes, she was able to see my career moving along.
Okay. So we've been talking for about an hour now, and you can give me any final thoughts. I know you definitely want to talk about Heather and vocal yoga, but don't give us too much because I'm thinking she would be a great interview as well. So let her reveal some of her own stuff.
She actually would. Well, let me see. There were a couple of things that you and I had discussed earlier, and I think a little bit of advice I can give to people who are trying to work. The most important thing is to just be professional. And to me, there's two definitions of who a pro is. And a pro is just someone who figures out a way to get the job done, no matter what the circumstances. You just got to figure out how to get things done and finish your projects and not give up. And you also, what I do is I look out for problems that are coming up, and I make calls, and if I have a question about something we're working on, or if my team has a disagreement, I call the supervisor and say, hey, what do you want? Because at the end of the day, I'm serving the filmmaker. So I want to know what they want. If I'm stuck on something, I ask. But with my boss, he knows that when he calls me, no matter what he asks of me, I'm going to do whatever I can to solve whatever problem has come up for a particular show. And mistakes that I see people make, people who are new, some people are uncomfortable and they tend to draw attention to themselves by giving an opinion that's not asked for. It's better if you're new on a job, for me, just to go up, show up, and figure out how to be of service, whether it is sweeping the floor or going for lunch. You just have to show a good attitude because uh, people will give you small jobs, and if you can do small jobs, then they'll give you bigger jobs. And one thing that I can't stand is people who show up to work with me and they're constantly apologizing for themselves. If they blow a cue, they say, I'm sorry, or if I hear I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it just starts to drive me crazy after a while. I want people just figuring out how to do the job and get it done. I don't want to hear apologies. And let's see, what else? I think that's probably about it. Yeah, we were talking about Heather. My wife's one of the better voice and singing coaches in Los Angeles, and she runs a voice studio in Pacific Palisades. She has everyone from foreign graduate students who are working on their doctorate, who are looking for a job and trying to improve their communication skills going to her, to people that you hear on records and see on in TV and movies. And she's got a great website with a lot of information for anyone who's an on-camera performer or speaker. It's vocalyoga.com, and she's got a great book called Vocal Yoga.
Great. And a great voice can help anyone because when they go in for interviews, having a confident voice, I mean, the way you use your voice and communicate can really apply to anyone.
Well, communication skills are key to anything, and the voice is one of your most important tools in presenting yourself. And so, yeah, you have to sound confident, but you also have to perform in a confident manner. So that's very, very important to ask questions if you don't know something and need information.
So where can we find Spirit of New Orleans?
Spirit of New Orleans, you can find it on Amazon.
Okay. Great. Well, this has been amazing. I loved listening to your journey, and you had so much great advice for everybody. And I want to just say thank you so much because I really, really, really enjoyed it. I knew I would.
Well, I appreciate it.
And if I am, then I know everyone who's listening will too.
Well, I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. If anyone has any specific questions, they're welcome to shoot me an email. I'm really open. And one last bit of advice I will give to people. Two important things. If you're a filmmaker and you have a project and you need to hire someone, and say you meet someone who's a really great editor or a great cameraman or a great Foley artist, you can, if you want to use them, don't ever feel like your project is below someone, because I've gotten that before, and all of us want to work. Everyone out there wants to work. And I know amazing people who will work on just about any project that comes their way if the project's got integrity and if they have time. I do a little bit of teaching at UCLA, and I charge them for it, but I do a lot of student films over there at the school. So don't be afraid when you meet someone that you would like to have work on your project. Don't be afraid to ask, because they can always accept, or they can decline, and everyone likes to be asked.
And they could even refer someone else.
Absolutely.
Who they're mentoring. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
And you can also find Michael Lyle on Facebook as well.
Yeah. And One of these days, I'm going to put up a web page about Foley. So when I do, I'll have that up on my Facebook page with a link.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And that's it, Green Letters. I mean, enjoy this one. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Jessica.